Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a professional challenge so tough it feels, well, almost unpassable. But the lessons from it, they apply to pretty much anyone facing a huge exam, a big presentation, or a make-or-break project.
Let's just start with a number, 80%. Get this, that's the failure rate for one of the world's most elite professional certifications, the Cisco Certified Internetwork Expert Lab Exam, or CCIE. A whopping 80% fail. Now, you have to understand, these aren't candidates who aren't smart. They are some of the sharpest network engineers on the planet. So the real question is, what separates that tiny 20% who pass from the huge 80% who don't? Well, it turns out the answer is all about predictable patterns of failure. So here's the thing. The key isn't that the exam is impossible. The real insight here is that it's a test of how well you execute under some pretty extreme pressure. And those failures, they follow these really specific, predictable paths. And once you see them, you can learn to avoid them.
So, what we can do is group these failure patterns into 4 distinct archetypes. And to make this really hit home, we're going to rank them by their candidate pain level, which is just a measure of how emotionally crushing each type of failure really is. Okay, so this table right here, this is basically our roadmap. We're going to start with a pretty predictable, almost expected kind of failure, pain level of 4. And we're going to build all the way up to the most gut-wrenching and, frankly, the most instructive mistake of them all. First up, we've got the undercooked. This is the person who just shows up underprepared. You know, they think 300 hours of practice is going to cut it, when really the bare minimum is more like 500. They've all the book smarts, right? They can explain the theory backwards and forwards, but they just don't have that deep, hands-on lab time to deal with all the weird quirks of real equipment. The pain level here is pretty low, a 4 out of 10, because deep down they kind of knew they weren't really ready. Next is the pressure cracker. Now this candidate is a rock star in their quiet home lab. They've put in the hours, for sure. But in that high-stakes 8-hour proctored exam, everything just falls apart. This isn't a knowledge gap. It's a performance gap. The mind goes blank, you start fumbling. It's just a classic case of not practicing under realistic high-pressure conditions.
Then you have the unlucky candidate. And look, let's be real. Sometimes bad luck is a thing. Hardware can die, the power can go out, a fire alarm might go off in your hotel the night before, and that stuff is incredibly frustrating. It feels so unfair. But the data shows this is actually pretty rare. It is not the main reason most people fail. The real reasons are usually things we can actually control.
But all that brings us to the final, and honestly, the most instructive failure of them all. This is the one with a pain level of a perfect, soul-crushing 10 out of 10. And this is where the most valuable lesson is hiding. This is the person we call the early celebrator. This is the candidate who walks out of that 8-hour marathon feeling amazing, totally euphoric. They are 100% certain they nailed it. In their mind, they're already texting their friends and picking out a frame for the certificate. And then the email arrives. And that one single word, failed, just completely contradicts their reality. It's a total gut punch. It's so devastating because they have no clue what went wrong. They've felt like they won, which makes the failure not just a disappointment, but a complete mystery. So how on earth does this happen? Well, it all boils down to 2 critical and seemingly small mistakes. First, they misread a single crucial word in a really dense technical requirement. Like, they missed one tiny constraint that the grading script is specifically looking for. And second, they just don't have a systematic, disciplined way of checking their own work. They just assume if it's working, it must be correct. So here's the absolute kiss of death: prioritizing speed over accuracy. A network can seem like it's working, it pings, traffic is flowing, but it can still fail because it doesn't meet the specific, tiny requirements of the automated grading script. That assumption that working equals correct, that is the #1 cause of this kind of failure. Okay, so how do you prevent this catastrophic, just soul-crushing error? The answer isn't just to be more careful. No, it's a strict, non-negotiable rule that completely changes how you approach the entire exam. It's called the 2-hour mandate. And I mean mandate. This is not a suggestion. It's not a nice to have. It is the core strategy that separates a 70% score, which is a fail, from a passing score of 80% or more. You must finish all your configurations in 6 hours, leaving 2 full hours just for verification. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. That protected 25% of your time, those 2 hours, That's not if you have time left over. No, that's a dedicated and mandatory part of the exam. You stop configuring, you go back to the very beginning, and you read every single task, checking your work against the exact requirements. This is where you catch the typos. This is where you catch the misinterpretation.
The lesson here is so much bigger than just one IT exam. It gets at a fundamental truth about what it takes to succeed in any high-stakes situation. It's not just about what you know, but about how you execute when it really, truly matters.
I mean, really think about it. Most of these candidates don't fail because they don't have the knowledge. They know the material inside and out. They fail because they lose points they absolutely knew how to earn, all because of small breakdowns in execution, in verification, and most importantly, in their process.
And that leaves us with a final thought to apply to our own challenges. When the stakes are at their highest, are we being tested on what we know? Or are we really being tested on the rigor and discipline of our process for applying that knowledge correctly every single time, especially when the pressure is on?